bosses are like spiders. They're more scared of you than you are of them. Ah, a spider! Oh wait, no, it's just a bit of lint. Okay, not every boss is scared of you, but certain bosses will, when faced with a stand-up fight, instead choose to run away from you as fast as their legs or wings can carry them. So instead of a rip-roaring boss fight, you spend the majority of the fight careening after them, trying to get a single hit as they flee from you like cats from a cucumber. See for yourself the cowardly bosses that wouldn't stop running away from you. Slippery little
Gary! Moron!
Why'd you do it, Gary?
Why not? I won! I tricked everyone! Starting with you, the head, the loser kids in town, and the prefects. Me! I won!
You are sad, man.
The best thing to do with bullies is to stand up to them, because that makes it much easier for them to throw a brick at you.
Using you as a pawn was so wonderfully obvious.
Final boss Gary there, the unassumingly named arch-antagonist of Rockstar's Bully. A final boss who is as punchable as he is impossible to punch, on account of how he constantly hoofs it.
James, I've been waiting. Let the games begin.
The fight against Gary kicks off after he instigates a full-scale riot at the Bulworth Academy school that you attend. Your first task is to hunt down and battle the various cliques that Gary has incited to mindless violence, like these powerful nerds who won't go down without a fight because they're down, and without a fight, turns out. The battle against Head Boy Gary sees you weaponless, however, and confronting Gary on scaffolding at the top of the school. Or trying to, except he keeps running away, the miserable coward, pausing only to, for instance, tip a wheelbarrow of breeze blocks onto you. Gary vanishes up a series of ladders, hiding behind piles of bricks and generally embarrassing himself instead of fighting fair. Get back here!
You'll never catch me, Hopkins.
Thankfully, after a whole lot of cowardly fleeing, Gary has nowhere left to go, except onto the floor when you punch him onto it and then stamp on his testicles, and then punch his face and body and testicles until you both plummet through a plate glass ceiling. Okay, to be completely fair, I can now see why he was running away.
What do you want? He's in the harbor, at the Long Pier, most likely. We heard what happened at the parade. Charles got all nervous, said he was leaving the country. I thought he was overreacting. It's not. No.
Thank you.
Despite their focus on stealthy assassinations, many of the old Assassin's Creed games did end in a boss fight. Altair fought his actual boss, Ezio 1v1 multiple Borgias, and in Assassin's Creed 3 there's one dude Connor really wants to stab up with his hidden blade. What was his name again?
Charles Lee. Any word on Lee? Charles Lee. You favor Lee? Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Where is Charles Lee? Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Where are you, Charles? Give me Lee!
You know what? I think it might be Charles Lee. So at the end of the game, it's deeply frustrating when you finally catch up to Charles Lee, only for him to immediately start fleeing you like a turbocharged roadrunner. Cue one of the most infuriating chase sequences in all of Assassin's Creed, a series that, may we remind you, has plenty of infuriating chase sequences. Anyone wanting full synchronization has to keep within 50 meters of the fleeing Charles Lee, while avoiding shoving anyone on this busy stretch of harbor, and not getting hurt by the flames in the burning boat Charles Lee retreats into. Which would be plenty tricky enough, even without the myriad other issues that make this one of the most annoying boss chases of all time. Even running at full pelt, Charles Lee just constantly runs faster than you, quickly pulling away, even though young assassin Connor would surely be a lot faster than a man whose main job for the last 10 years has been standing around looking evil in a uniform. Another problem is the inconvenient randomness of the game. The firing squads who try to stop you, for instance, sometimes spawn in the entirely wrong place, blocking your path and completely f***ing up your run. When you finally do reach the boat, it collapses around you as the fire spreads, stopping your flow and creating a deadly labyrinth that is easier to get lost in than an IKEA on a Sunday. And And heck, even if you do know where you're going, sometimes the game doesn't, and Connor can miss a simple jump, fall, and get stuck in an inescapable pit of burning boat. I'm having fun, if by fun you mean stress headache. Still, when you finally finish the chase, you do catch up to Charles Lee, and Connor shoots Charles Lee in a cutscene.
Yet you fight. You resist. Why?
Because no one else will.
Well, at least he's dead forever. Oh no, actually, he's not dead, and he's running off again. Classic him. Connor, what was his name again?
Charles Lee. Any word on Lee? Charles Lee. You favor Lee? Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Where is Charles Lee? Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Charles Lee. Where are you, Charles? Give me Lee!
Never give up! Trust your instinct!
You wouldn't think a giant robot made of rocks would be scared of anything. Except perhaps weathering? We've got no explanation then for why the Golomech boss in Star Fox 64 is such a certified wuss.
They're everywhere!
Encountered on the game's final level, right before the game's final boss, this lumpen robot lives inside a vast, imposing temple.
Jeez Louise, what is that?
That temple gives me the creep.
As the music goes all music-y, the stage is set for an ancient evil to make itself known. So it's a bit weird when the Golomech appears, then immediately legs it.
What's going on? He's running away.
When your cowardice surprises even Slippy the Toad, it's time to make a change. Why the Golomech doesn't simply turn around and slam Fox McCloud's flimsy R-wing into the rock wall with its gigantic fists is unclear, but we have to assume it's rooted in simply being totally spineless. Instead, this boss prefers to sprint away from you at maximum speed, flinging vertical and horizontal pillars into your path that you have to dodge, in between blasting chunks out of its retreating form. Keep it up and you'll discover, hey, the Golomech has a spine after all. It was right under all of that rock you just shot. It's not a great feeling to gun down a boss as it's retreating, but any guilt will evaporate once you've died to those extremely annoying pillars a few times. Oh well, at least Slippy's distraught. That's something.
Look who it is! Kratos, the ghost of Sparta, the fallen god, the cursed mortal.
To catch a fly from the ass of Zeus is not worth my time, Hermes.
A coward's words, Kratos. You don't try to catch me because you know you can't. Kratos, where are you off to today?
Nowadays, we're familiar with Dad Kratos, who loves his son and only kills other gods if he really has to.
Must be better than this.
Honestly, he really had to. But back in the original trilogy, Kratos was ticking gods off his hit list faster than a top 40 countdown, and with a lot more blood. One god he squares up to in God of War 3 is Hermes, widely known as the Greek god of swiftness, but also in the UK as a delivery company so terrible that they had to change their name to Every because they were so unswift. Every, short for every package they deliver to my house gets thrown in a bush and has a hole in the box. 0 stars. But God of War 3's Hermes actually lives up to his name, when, upon being confronted, he sprints off as fast as his little winged boots can carry him, which is fair enough considering what happens to any other god who gets within range of Kratos.
Consumed by vengeance to his last breath, the Spartan lights the way to dusty death.
And he does drag Kratos on a wild god chase, sometimes stopping completely, just to taunt him.
Close, Spartan, but you'll have to try harder.
But the whole time Kratos silently pursues him until eventually Hermes lands on a statue of Athena for one last taunt.
Keep up, Kratos!
At which point Kratos catapults himself towards Hermes atop a boulder, smashing the statue and injuring Hermes enough that he can't get away, making this an immediate lesson on the dangers of hubris.
I will not be bested by a mortal.
Maybe you should have just legged it, eh Hermes? And speaking of legging it, Kratos likes Hermes' boots of speed so much that he cuts his legs off. YouTube won't let us show you that, so here's an artist's impression instead.
Zelda fans will tell you that Twilight Princess is a more mature entry in the Zelda series. Darker in tone, with considerably less whimsical nonsense than you might find in other Zelda games. And those Zelda fans are correct in their assessment, right up until the end, when evil Lord Ganondorf enters his third phase and turns what should have been a serious final boss fight downright silly. Even sillier than lightning tennis against a possessed Zelda. And even sillier than arm wrestling a giant boar. No, we're talking about the bit after that, when Ganondorf just cheeses it. This mounted battle takes place in Hyrule Field, with Ganondorf riding his fearsome charger in the opposite direction as fast as possible. Despite being, we're told, a terrifying warrior who broke free of the Twilight Realm to effortlessly conquer Hyrule, Ganondorf's only tactic here is to zigzag away from you as fast as he can, while spamming spells over his shoulder, like this is a game of playground tag rather than a climactic battle of good versus evil. The problems for Ganondorf here are twofold. First, he's not that fast, so it's no challenge really to get Zelda within arrow range, to soften him up for a thwack with the Master Sword. And secondly, his cowardly behaviour is accidentally quite funny. Things do eventually get more serious again, or a bit more serious, once Ganondorf realises running won't work and fights you one-on-one. A scenario that ends moments later with Link plunging the Master Sword through his ribs, and Link's like, dude, and Zelda's like, whoa, and Ganondorf's like, no laughing! This is a very serious Zelda game. Please respect it.
Judging by how she went from being a practicing doctor to the neglected girlfriend of an actual clown, Harleen Quinzel is accustomed to taking steps backwards in life. But never has she taken more steps backwards in her life than this boss fight in LEGO Batman. Playing the level Little Fun at the Big Top as Batman, you eventually face Harley Quinn in a casino-themed arena. And being the Dark Knight, you're there to incapacitate the Queen of Clownery. Which is easier said than done when you immediately get clowned on by Harley, flipping out of the way. Ah yes, Batman's one weakness, backflips. Harley's gymnastic abilities really pay off. You can't get a single hit on her as she springs constantly out of reach. And if you try to get in front of her, she just immediately changes direction, making it utterly impossible to catch her. Oh my god, Robin, stop following me and try to cut her off. She's so fast and agile that the only way you can finally get her is by waiting until she gets too dizzy from the constant rotations and has to stop. Finally! And you only have to do that 6 more times. Is this the best use of your time, Dr. Quinzel?
Now, to be clear, Dark Son Gwendolyn in Dark Souls never actually runs away, because he's too much of a magic wanker for that. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a boss in Dark Souls, or indeed all of video games, whose fighting style is more cowardly or involves more moving quickly away from the player. Not using his legs in this case, but teleportation spells. Found in a concealed part of the imposing city of Anor Londo, Gwendolyn is fought in a seemingly endless corridor. He has very few moves at his disposal, which is great, but less great is that one of those moves is to vanish farther down the infinite corridor if you ever get close, and another move is to nuke you from enormous distance with a killing ray. Seems fair. As such, fighting Gwendolyn involves scampering cautiously along the corridor, doing your level best to evade his magic and arrows until eventually you get close to him, and then hoping you're quick enough to get even one hit in before he portals away like Doctor Strange in a nightgown. Then do that again, and again, and again, until either the cowardly Gwendolyn's health is finally chipped away to nothing and the boss fight finally ends, or you remember that this is an optional boss and that actually Dark Souls is an optional game, and give it up in favour of a less infuriating challenge, like seeing how many goes it takes to frisbee your Dark Souls disc into the bin. Oh, I missed again? Man, I suck at this.
Get good, scrub. Little behind the scenes for you. Luke actually drew this with his own fair hand. Apparently at school he was known for being the best at doing the blood. So
Told you that in confidence.
now you know something new about Luke. And in return, favour for a favour, would you watch this video from Outside Xtra for me? And then would you kindly watch this video from Outside Xbox for me also? I would love it very much. What's he happy about? I mean, actually, yeah, it's obvious. The leg cutting, isn't it? Yeah.